this is something that we started last March, the conversational session, the first day, because in this way they are kind of plenary conversation, and it went so good, and the feedback that we got was almost unanimous about to do these things. So this time we are doing that twice. Once now and once after the workshop on two different topics. The topic that we decided to present to you are what we think, maybe we are wrong, that are the topics that usually there is no grant and no budget, university budget that will finance this kind of papers. And it's so important, interdisciplinary communication and research on one side, and on the other side, it's so important, the academic ethics, the academic logos, that is not just technical, but it's also non-technical, which is the one what differentiates instruction from education. So these two topics are, in the opinion of many people that have been in our conferences, extremely important. But all of them agreed to tell us that they cannot find a budget in their university, in their department, and in grants that would allow them to do this kind of presentation or this kind of papers. So the IAS decided to make this kind of compensations in order to be input to potential papers that you might write on the subject. And the IAAS would be financing, providing support for this kind of paper that we think are important, but there is no budget in the universities and in the grants to this kind of paper. And this is why any paper, be it position paper, reflection paper, or action research paper, is going to be, after editorial review, this is why it's invited paper, just editorial review, not external review, will be included in the proceedings of the volume, the post-conference volume of the proceedings. So that's the reason, or maybe the meta reason, of this conversational session. So this is what I was supposed to say before introducing, not me, you introduce him and he introduce you.
All right. Well, I
would be biased if I introduce both of you. They are friends for a long time, you know.
Well, it is definitely my pleasure to introduce Dr. Karl Müller, Director of the Steinbeis Transfer Center, New Cybernetics, Vienna, Austria, and Professor at the University of Ljubljana, Slovenia. His main research interests range from issues in complex modeling within the social sciences and from interdisciplinary analyses of innovation processes in science, technology, and economy to the history and the current potential of inter- and transdisciplinary research to the frontiers of second-order cybernetics and radical constructivism, or to the newly emerging risk potentials for contemporary societies in general. He has an extensive list of publications, which you can read in your guide. I won't try to translate them, because some of them involve German. And he has the problem of the introduction for me was written for a different workshop, so it really isn't relevant to what we're talking about here. So, hey, it's all yours.
It's my special pleasure and challenge to introduce Grandin Gil. I wanted to stay with the family version of Grandin, but Gil is his last name, and he's professor at the University of South Florida, and he's one of the world experts in case method research. I've listened to various presentations of him, and I was always He's author of the book Informing with the Case Method. This is an application being for a consequence of being a world champion in case method studies, and recently became founding editor of Journal of Information Technology Education, discussing cases once again. So we too will act as facilitators, try to help us to come up with some ideas and lasting ideas, and to something which persists even if we leave this conference after 1 hour. So the responsibility is on maybe on your side. So I would like to.
50 seconds.
Yes.
It just the things that you got with your material is going to be just distributed today. It's a short description about what conversational sessions are, and there is a table contrasting conversational session with traditional ones. So the traditional ones are related to solutions, to problems. They present you solutions. Conversational sessions are related to the input is questions. So what you need to do is to make questions and hope that the audience will provide some answer now or in their papers.
Well, I've got a question for you, Carl. Why do you think this is so hard?
That's rational choice provides an answer in terms of just they call it the volunteer problem. That if there's a large group and there's an obvious thing to do, nobody in the group does it. Not because they have no ideas and so on, but simply for rational considerations. I think someone else does it, and if everyone thinks someone else does it, then the whole group stops. And this phenomenon can be found even in accidents. If there's someone lying there and there's a group standing around, and the group is staying unmoved until someone comes up. So the problem is called the volunteer problem. What we really need from you is a volunteer. Someone has to move on now, despite the rational considerations of not doing it.
Actually, the question I meant to ask is why is interdisciplinary communication so hard? However, as it turns out, that's the volunteer problem is indeed one of the challenges that
we currently have.
So
once someone comes up, then the barrier is broken.
I'm sorry.
Wonderful.
The challenge in interdisciplinary communications begins, I think, actually with vocabulary. Each of the individuals speak a different vocabulary. And how do you find a balance? Additionally, because it's areas of expertise, not only do you have to find a balance in a common vocabulary, but there's a question of the dynamics within the group. There will be a need for clear leadership. There is a need for clear targeting of the goal. There is a need for clear functional assessment at the end of it. And how do you structure something as you're moving into the process so that these elements are taken care of?
Okay. A question for you. There are a lot of terms like interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary. Do you see any difference between those, or do they seem similar to you?
They seem different. Interdisciplinary implies within a particular group or a particular topic set, people will have different skills. Multidisciplinary implies external group skill set. So, for example, mathematics versus computer science versus medicine, instead of geriatrics versus internal medicine within the medical construct.
Okay. Any other Jerry?
I just had an opportunity to reread this paper by Nancy. All have a copy of it. Integrating the conversational format in conventional conferences. And I've been at these conferences for a number of years, and I think this is the first, maybe it's not the first time because they haven't noticed this. This is the first time I think we've really starting to take the necessary direction. I come here repeatedly, and I go to a lot of other conferences, and everybody else does. And I pick up these programs that are very typical, and I go through all these very abstruse papers, things that are totally outside of our area. And I'm just thinking of going into those micro worlds. And I say, okay, how is somebody presenting, just taking one at random, the comparison of alternative processes for support decisions, actually more of a generic one, but something that's really specialized. And I'm thinking these people inside these conferences, how do they communicate with the other? And I look at this chart. I think it's the most explicit. It's about the best thing I've seen in a long while, quite frankly. The comparison between the conventional conferences and conversation format. I think the problem is, how do we take these people in these very, very specialized conferences and then integrate them into this? How do we make this apply to that? I mean, where's the dialect? How do we connect these two?
Okay. Other comments? Yeah. Is it just, vocabulary, the group dynamics, the fact that we're dealing with micro worlds, or are there other obstacles to interdisciplinary?
I'm reading now a book on intercultural communication.
Okay.
And about the 50–60% of what I found in this book by analogical thinking, you can infer a lot of things in disciplines because disciplines are intellectual cultures. So I would add that we are in different culture, and this is why sometimes it's so difficult to understand each other, because we are in different culture, intellectual culture.
Would someone offer me a definition of what a culture is? And what do we when we use the term culture, what do we mean?
What I'm meaning with that is the cultivation of intellectual habits.
Okay.
And standards.
So, habits.
The cultivation of them.
Standards. We actually, vocabulary could be one. Other things that cultures share? Go ahead.
In the context of research and those kind of things.
Okay, good. They have certain contexts. That's when you see certain problems, it pops into your mind. Any other things that people see in terms of cultures? Go ahead.
Take a particular example. Is anybody here from South Asia? You from South Asia? All right. It's a good example. Basically, Northern European. Now, we have this linearity. You go to Descartes. If you don't think there's not linearity, there it is. That micro-analysis. This is a cultural thing. If I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, you have the Hindu-Buddhist tradition, which is more holistic. You start from a totally different world, which, quite frankly, I sympathize with. The cat's out of the bag. Where you have this whole thing about Maya, illusion, and everything else. Want to that quantum physicists do agree with you. Here in our world, we take this is the reality. This is what we think this is really it. It's Maya, it's illusion. Now, how's that going to shape something like this? When somebody's into themselves, presenting something on bone marrow, or whatever it is, that's the reality. But that's transitory. There's a cultural thing right there. And so, these folks, frankly, I agree with you, but if we were different from a different, we're coming from a point of linearity, and this is what it really is, as opposed to, no, this is Maya, this is really so transitory. This is Plato and that kind of stuff. I think that's the fundamental thing, the ethos. The ethos, that's what we're missing nowadays. We'll get into that later. But
Yeah, I was going to say, for those of you who are interested, they're talking about ethos at 4:30. So.
yeah, but I just wanted to stick that under the rug. The camel's nose is under the tent.
You had your hand up, and then you, or
Yeah, I think the belief in the people's mind will be part of the culture, maybe the core of the culture. Like people think about what is important for them, the value, what kind of the thing is important, what kind of the fact, what kind of the truth,
Yep.
what kind of the issue, what kind of the solution, what kind of application. Yeah. I think
Okay.
that's kind of culture.
excellent. You?
So I go with Maya. I hope I can understand my way of thought. So I will say, I will define Maya like this: not knowing something, knowing something. So you say it as Maya and reality. So I will say that Maya is something like not knowing. So reality is something like knowing. So if I know something, I'm happy with that. So it's very important for any interdisciplinary research to know something of the other subject. So first of all, I have to get into the subject. So knowing is important. Not knowing means, okay, I don't know. So if completely it is closed, I cannot see anything. So I have to define somehow what is there inside. Unless I open it, I cannot say. So it is a word which is used to open your mind, open up, realize, see the reality. So that's why I will define it.
How is it spelled?
M-A-Y-A.
M-A-Y-A.
Y-A.
Okay.
So it cannot be. Maya definition is wrong because I'm seeing everything. How can it be Maya? I'm existing. You are existing. Books are there. Material is there. Information is there. So it is not correct. It's only the understanding of Maya. It is something that I should know. I should explore to know. If I know it, I will know. I have the satisfaction of knowing something. So until you reach it, you don't know it. That's why I will say that.
I would like to add that Dr. Connor is PhD in psychology and in divinity. I'm not sure if she wants me to say that, but she is also Buddhist priest. So I would love to have, if we can have her opinion.
Absolutely.
I am feeling the same way. There is a dance between perception and perception defining reality and defining immediacy of experience, and the difference between how we create the reality moment to moment and what goes on in the space between people's thoughts. So what is happening as we're creating a synergistic team in the space between the thoughts is the interaction that's going on between people. And what is happening in the space as we're creating the form and the energy of the form as the interdisciplinary team comes together. How are we weighing what you're bringing of the wisdom that you have and the wisdom that you have across the cultures and also the wisdom between the disciplines? How are we weighing the value of each of those? So the weight of the value is also a piece, as is the creation of the reality moment to moment.
Okay. Go ahead.
We need to see something that has happened in the past, which is more touching to the multidisciplinary aspect and multidisciplinarity kind intellectual multidisciplinarity. Once we look at the ancient philosophers, you will discover that some of the French philosophers, René Descartes, even many more, you will see that those people were mathematicians, they were doctors at the same time. They had to embrace so many things at the same time. Isn't it that we are trying, in other words, to come back to that kind of thing? Because we ventured into more expertise, then we realized that this world is more interconnected. Isn't that we are trying also to explore that field, because they were more powerful in the sense that they could understand, one person could understand actually different aspects of life and interconnect at the same time. It's just something I've put on the table.
Yep, okay, excellent. So, I mean, to try to paraphrase what I think you said, to correct me if I'm wrong, but, ultimately, we've had this, we've had this long progression, and you can think of it as being a byproduct of the Industrial Revolution, the scientific revolution, and so forth, where we've gotten more and more focused on very narrow things, which are essentially the disciplines, but in a certain sense what we're now discovering is that these disciplines simply will not address a lot of the problems that we're dealing with. And, in the days of in earlier days, you could have people like Benjamin Franklin here in the United States who made advances in everything, philosophy, science, and so forth, and they, by nature, had an interdisciplinary perspective, whereas now, now if we don't get back to that perspective, things will get so narrow that everything, that it won't solve the problems. Is that more or less what you were saying? I was trying to paraphrase. Okay, well, we've talked about things like culture and this sort of thing, and at some point, Carl, you get to take. You get to lead this discussion. I'm not here to do all of it, but what? Given that this is the challenge, and maybe we could start with some concrete examples that people have, because in a multidisciplinary audience where we have people from a lot of disciplines, it's sometimes useful to be concrete. Does anyone here have any sense of things that have worked for you or have worked for the organizations that you work with for achieving breaking down of these barriers?
I'm going to help you now.
Oh!
One of my, for me, the most interesting interdisciplinary experience was when I worked, and do this now for almost 20 years, together with a theoretical physicist. When I'm more a social scientist, philosophy of science, and so on from my background, and he's a theoretical physicist. And he has come up with a new type of generation of models to study the dynamics of interactive systems, and the models were called synergetic models, and this become in this chaos complexity theory an important branch. And I had a lot of data on the evolution of the employment system in Austria, the education system in Austria, and so on. So I had a lot of data, but didn't have the ways and means to create a model for these, for example, interacting sectors or interacting school types and so on. But I knew that from the structure of the problem, these synergetic models would be useful. So we came together and we started an interdisciplinary communication and cooperation. But the important thing I want to bring here to it was very successful and very productive, but we had something like a mediating design. We had a common agenda to which we both could agree. He was the specialist for modeling. I was the specialist for a theoretical background and data. And we came up with a design where we specified what's needed from him, what's needed from me, what are the intersections, and so on. So these mediating designs, or the roles of mediators, is extremely important in making interdisciplinary communication successful. I've read numerous applications also that where different groups had, and then we bring all these different perspectives to a problem, and now during this project we will sit together and discuss and find out new things. But this coming together and talking is too little. You need at least some persons who could act as mediators between different groups, and you need some sort of mediating design where you have some vision or work plan how you organize your cooperation. And this was, from my experience, the example of a group that wanted to bring to you, and because this was really the difference between a lot of things which I knew in terms of failed interdisciplinary communication and successful ones.
Now, does the mediator, what are the ideal characteristics of a mediator or mediating design?
The mediator should have knowledge in both areas and should have sensibility of what can be done by, let's say, side 1 and what can be done by side 2. And the mediator is also responsible for coming up with some sort of work plan for the group to which all group members can adhere. So that the mediator brings, in interdisciplinary communication, it's everything there: the willingness to do, the willingness to talk, and so on. But there's a special person or a gender needed to organize it, to structure it, and that's the primary role.
It might help if the individual could walk on water as well. You're talking about an individual that can be challenging to find.
These people are always there with sufficient knowledge in both areas, and they don't have to be specialists in the second area, but they have to have some sort of sufficient idea of what the other group can in order to come up with such an intermediate or mediating design.
Great. Okay.
I have 4 concrete things to you.
All right.
And to all of you. The first one, you're not going to believe it. The word information and the concept of information is used everywhere. I would say that this is probably the most transdisciplinary concept that I can find. Hardly there is a discipline without that word or that concept. I've been working on that for 30 years, and I found no consensus what information is. I have no idea what information is. After writing my first paper in his journal about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, and then that paper expanded to 100 pages, and the more pages I write, the less I know what information is. Second one, knowledge. The philosopher wrote a lot about what knowledge is. But academicians, most of them, they don't read. So what we are understanding in academy is knowledge. I found no common ground to link us about what knowledge is. We made a conference on that, an event on that, and it was a failure. Just 4 papers. We asked why, and we got the same answer again. There is no one that financed this kind of papers. So this is another example why you can write in something that is not being financed. If you got the time, we got the financial support to publish it. Complexity. When you talk about complexity, you brought to my mind all of that. There is at least, I didn't went through that. I went through 1 paper. If I believe the guy, and I believe him, there is about 120 different definitions of complexity. There is no common ground. So how we are going to communicate with this another concepts, transdisciplinary concepts. So these are, there is another word. You're not going to be agreeing with me, so, but I'm going to say, I bet you that we don't agree here what academy is. So when we're going to talk about academic ethos, pathos, and logos, the problem is not going to be about ethos, pathos, and logos. It's going to be about academic. What's that? Can we continue confusing instruction with education? So these are four concepts that are transdisciplinary that we don't agree on. So they should be concepts because they are transdisciplinary, they should be linking people among us. But they are not. They are creating confusion. So we are prepared to make some special issue publication in each one of these concepts, in which each one would say whatever he or she thinks each concept should mean or means. And this is the kind of encyclopedia that we announced about 15 years ago, and we couldn't do it. Not to have an encyclopedia when you find just one entry about information, not Wikipedia, not the Britannic library. When you get into information, let's have hundreds of definitions of information. So if we can start with 3, 4, 5 concepts and end up in an interdisciplinary encyclopedia, that would be the best thing I can do in my life before that. Let's start with 3, 4 little books on the subject. You have something concrete?
Yes, I was just going to thank the Chief for giving us a concrete success story of interdisciplinary.
Yeah.
If this is success, then that's what failure is.
I will add one thing. It is basically the economic support from the society that we expect. Economic growth, economic support is for interdisciplinary because the problems that is not solved yet are of interdisciplinary nature. So economic support for research will come only if we switch over to interdisciplinary nature.
Yeah, and this is not just an ethical problem that we have. This is a pragmatic problem that we have.
Yeah.
To do what we are saying.
Well, we definitely veered off the question, but I am used to losing control in a role as a moderator. Why don't you go ahead, please?
Thank you. My name is Rafael Melere. I'm from Ecuador. I heard Professor Najib some interesting things, and I think just saying something that we have 3 main units: matter, energy, information. And knowledge is the materialization of information. An academic is doing it in a coherent way. That's it.
Okay. Any other? Jeremy? Go ahead.
To address both you and Najee, it occurred, and you've heard this in different contexts. I'm going to use both the